Well, welcome. In today's session, I'm going to try and focus on a question that is usually implicit in some of the statements that are made by women who are much older in relation to the challenges they face in finding a life partner or a long-term partner. That question is, why older women are losing to younger women in the game of modern dating. Now, I guess to get things started, I hope you guys recall, but let me go back a number of sessions. I I introduced I think five women who were featured in an article by The Guardian. One was Caitlin, the other was Jane, the other was Elaine, there was Mary, and there was Yvonne. Caitlin was 39 years old. Jane was 49. Elaine was 37. Mary was 53. And Yvonne was 28. Now, all of these women had something in common, according to the article. They were what we call femcells. This means that they were involuntarily celibate. These were women who had tried for many years, many years, to be in a relationship, but couldn't find a suitable relationship or couldn't find a man to consider them either for a casual or for a long-term relationship. And the question is, why do we have this commonality amongst what we might call middle-aged women, mature women? Why are they losing out to younger women in the game of dating? Now, when I talk about younger women, if you recall, I made reference to what I call the age categorization, where I made reference to different age groups, 18 to 22, 23 to 27, 28 to 32, and 33 to 35. And then you have what we call above 36, or 36 and above. And I made reference to the fact that when I'm referring to younger women, I'm referring to women between the age of 18 and 27. But this could also extend all the way up to about 29, just before they turned 30. Why the women who are much older, more experienced, have more of a lived collection of memories and opportunities and possibilities, why are they losing out to younger women, losing out to women between the age of 18 and 27? And that will be the focus for today. My intention, as always, is to help. I will try to provide some ideas that I believe perhaps could be of help. Now, let me start by saying, from a man's perspective, there is a lot of misconception. The men always want younger women. That is not always the case. Especially men of a certain socioeconomic status, or men of certain educational levels, or men of certain values in the society. Because if that was the case, then most men would be marrying women between 18 and 20. But even when you find men who are in their 40s, late 30s, when they decide to settle down, or for example, men who have been married and then got divorced and are looking to marry again, they tend not to go for very, very young women. So I think the idea that men always choose younger women is not necessarily incorrect, it's simply incomplete. The missing part is that most men are not necessarily always looking for beauty alone, though important. They're looking for a much bigger package. But it just so happens, using this example, that even the 5 women that I profiled, they seem to be losing. They seem to be losing to younger women. As a matter of fact, in the Guardian article, anyone who read it genuinely would have felt really sad for these women, because personally, I couldn't understand why they were losing at the game. Now, let me start by making some references, and I think that would help. Men do not choose women who turn them on. Or rather, let me rephrase that. Certainly they do. Men do not get married to women who turn them on. Or rather, when choosing wives, men do not focus only on women who turn them on. Rather, they focus on choosing women who do not turn them off. Now, let me say that again. In choosing a spouse, in choosing a long-term partner, men do not choose, good men, intelligent men, men of value, do not choose women who simply turn them on. They choose women who do not turn them off. And what that means is that there has to be something beyond the physical attributes that the woman has. As a matter of fact, let me begin with just a few observations that are both acknowledged and shared by women, younger women, but also made by men. There is a feeling that most young women are boring. There is a feeling that they rely on their beauty and have no personality. Now, I'm talking about on the average. There is a feeling that amongst the younger women, that conversationally, they are less interesting. And they can't often contribute to certain conversations. And I'm talking about deep conversations, important conversations. There is a feeling that they have such an addiction to social media and pop culture. And number 5, that they have fewer things in common with these men. I think anyone who was to go through these 5 items would agree in general with each of them. Younger women tend to be boring. They tend to rely on their beauty because they lack personality. They're conversationally less interesting. They don't have much to contribute in relation to different issues. Someone you can have a conversation with about a wide range of topics. They have more of an addiction to social media and pop culture because they were raised and born in the social media phase. And as a result of maybe the age difference, you tend to find that with younger women and older men, there's less in common, just because you have different lived experiences. Now, with all of that, the question then is, why are older women losing on the game of dating, despite all of these so-called disadvantages that younger women have? Let me make this practical. Let's say we have 2 ladies. Let's take one of the ladies from the 5. Let's say this is Caitlin. And let's say this is Maya. Let's say Maya is 23 years old. So she has all of these attributes that I've just defined. And let's say Caitlin is being compared against Maya. And there is a guy who is on the market, and let's say he is 42. Caitlin is 39, Maya is 23, James is 42. He's looking to date, so he comes to the marketplace, he sees both ladies. Now, for the sake of this conversation, let's just assume that there isn't much of a difference between both ladies in relation to their SMV, their sexual market value. Let's say, obviously, the younger lady has the virtue of youth. Therefore, she would score slightly higher, and the older woman would score slightly less. But let's say Maya has an SMV of an 8 or a 7. No, let's say an 8. So there's a big distinction, just to make my point. 8. And let's say Caitlin has an SMV of a 6. Sexual marketplace value, in other words, the level of attractiveness. Dress size, her weight, her height, shape of her face, her features, the position of certain parts of her body in terms of proportionality, level of natural beauty that she has in relation to enhanced beauty. But let's just say it's 8 and a 6. In terms of her reproductive fertility value, Maya is an 8. And I can't explain, I won't go into detail, but just go back to some of the videos, because in the prior videos, I explained how you rank this. But in principle, you have 18 to 20 will be between a 9 and a 10 in terms of value, reproductive fertility value. And then between 23 and 27, you're looking at 7 to 8. So she's bang on 23 years old, so she would be an 8. But because Caitlin is 39, she's gone past geriatric pregnancy. She's in high risk pregnancy. And therefore, in terms of her reproductive value, you're looking at something below 4. I'll give her a 4. But let's say James already has 2 kids from a previous relationship, so he doesn't want kids. So technically speaking, although he says he doesn't want kids, he's really not opposed to having a child with his new spouse if he does get married. There is something called your non-sexual marketplace value. And this is where Caitlin should outperform Maya, because Caitlin has had a lot more time to learn the traditional values, a lot more time to be feminine. She was also born at a time when she's perhaps seen her parents love each other. She's seen what it means to serve a man. She's dated a lot more men, or had the opportunity to date a lot more men. Therefore, she should have a lot more success in relation to her ability to cooperate with a man. The question is, why is Caitlin still losing to Maya? All things considered. Now, one of the reasons is, despite the fact that at 23, Maya is still relatively very young, she may be called boring. She is certainly relying on her beauty and her youth. She really doesn't have a personality, because what tends to happen is at this age, they have no uniqueness. All the ladies are trying to be like each other. They tend to admire certain role models, and they simply replicate the behaviors they see from such role models. They haven't come into their own understanding of their unique virtues and values and what makes them different. They haven't reconstructed their self-image. Despite being crazy about social media and having fewer things in common with James, after all, James is 19 years older than she is. Why is it that James would overlook Caitlin, who is 39, just 3 years his junior, for a younger woman? Now, despite the feeling that it has to do with her youth and her beauty, Caitlin is a 6. Maya is an 8. There isn't much of a difference between both numbers. And that means that Caitlin is also a very pretty woman or an attractive woman, whereas Maya is a beautiful woman. But it's neither here nor there. So why would, if James does not consider having more kids super important, why would he neglect Caitlin and choose Maya, despite the fact that, all things considered, you know, Caitlin should be scoring roughly a 9 or a 10 in femininity, in her traditional skills, traditional values, in her temperament, in her attitude, in her ability to communicate, converse with a man, in her emotional intelligence. She should be scoring much more in the fact that she's had enough time to reflect on life and know how to collaborate, cooperate with a man. Whereas someone like Maya should be scoring much, much less, maybe a 6 or even a 5, because she's still quite young. You know, she's graduated at 18, gone to university, so she hasn't had time to develop her feminine side if she did not get that, growing up. Now, one of the reasons why women who are much older are losing out to younger girls is because, despite the fact that the older women should have all the advantages in relation to the non-sexual marketplace values, they are no different from the younger girls. They are not different. Most of these women have not had any experience. Most of them have bought into the feminist movement. They don't necessarily see the advantages of being feminine or having some traditional skills. For example, can she cook? Can she clean? Can she look after a home? Does she have those maternal skills? Does she want to be supportive in her role in the family by working with the man to, say, raise his kids? Or, for example, if James has, from his estranged wife, he has a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, can Caitlin come in and be the stepmother? But to be a stepmother, you have to have been taught how to be a mother. You have to have been raised. It's not something you do, not something you learn on the job. The issue is that despite the fact that Caitlin is 39 and she's 16 years older than Maya, she also has no skills. She's not feminine. She's not traditional. Her attitude perhaps is just as bad as the younger girl. So all things considered, what tends to happen is James will happily choose the younger woman for a number of reasons. The first is that she can learn and he can work with her because she's still young. Think about this from the perspective of she doesn't have, her mind has not had a lot of information and input. And therefore it's easy to learn, unlearn, and relearn. As a man, I can tell you this. Older women are exceptionally stubborn, mostly closed-minded, and much harder to get along with in relation to trying out new things. At 39, all things considered, a woman who's 39 earns, she has a job or career, she has a home, she's traveled, she's provided for herself everything that she would have needed to the point where she's independent of a man. She's independent of the man. She wants him, but she feels she doesn't need him. Whereas younger women, recognizing that they're still transitioning from father. And at 18, you're baby daddy's girl, you're the baby of the family. You get to 20, you're still the baby of the family. You go to university, you're the baby of the family. You graduate at 21, you get out into the marketplace at 23, you're still a baby. So when a man comes into the woman's life, in many ways there's a transference of fatherhood, where, number one, the man is grateful that he's met someone who needs him, who is happy to depend on him, especially financially, but also in relation to protection, guidance, structure, vision, purpose, fulfillment. And therefore, men tend to draw on a sense of significance when they date younger women because the ladies look up to them and the men look up to the ladies as well. It's almost like a mutual relationship where there is interdependence. Now, the second thing is that the younger lady has not had a lot of experiences. And therefore, from a man's perspective, we're looking for adventure. And so it's a lot easier to suggest things to do with a younger woman and to receive almost like a sense of appreciation, the fact that she's excited. Think about this like a dog. When a dog sees you, the dog is very excited. Younger women are very enthusiastic about life. They have a zest rather, for life. Exuberance, excitement, anticipation, inspirational. They're motivated to do things, try things, explore. Whereas older women have been almost conditioned in their paradigms of how they've lived. So for example, let me make this more practical. You meet, let's say James says to Caitlin, would you like to go to Marseille for the weekend? And she says, I've been there. Would you like to go to Rome? I've been there. Would you like to go to Nice? Or would you like to go to Cannes? I've been there. Okay, let's try a different country. Would you like to go to one of the Scandinavian countries? Copenhagen. I've been there. The man starts to run out of options because, of course, at 39, she's had a lot of experience. He goes up to Maya and says, would you like to go to Copenhagen? She says yes. She's thrilled. She's never been. She's excited. He says, well, we can go to Copenhagen or we can go to Budapest. She's euphoric. That inspires men. Men are inspired when we feel that we're needed. As a matter of fact, one of the things women don't understand is how much a man needs to be needed. And so what you find is, although Caitlin, who is more mature, although she should get along much more with James, she doesn't, because she's not feminine, any more feminine than Maya. James can send Maya to a school for her to become more feminine if she didn't learn the skills at home, and she would happily go. Caitlin, on the other hand, will not go, simply because she feels it's unnecessary. In terms of the traditional values, at 39, a woman who cannot cook, who cannot clean, who has no domestic skills, who does not have any maternal skills, is less attractive than a younger woman who also does not have such skills. With a younger woman, you can work with her. Now, for those who might be thinking, why should a woman be domesticated? Men of certain, and the men I refer to, are looking to have families, or they're coming with a family. When you're dating someone at 25, you guys can eat out every day. You can order takeaways, and that's fine. When you have children, there has to be a structure. That means it's not just about making sure that the kids go to bed at a certain time. They also have to eat at a certain time. They need a balanced meal. They need a nutritious meal. And all of that comes with maternal skills. It's something you learn by observation as a young girl or young boy, but it's something you can also learn through study. So, one of the reasons why most older women are losing out is because when it comes to the NSMV, your non-sexual marketplace value, you're not performing any better than the younger girls, which means the man decides that the younger girl has youth, she has her fertility is still intact, she's more attractive, or even if she's less attractive, but also she's really comparable to the older woman in relation to the non-sexual marketplace values the woman has. So the question is, Um, I've identified a problem. The question is, what's the solution? Okay, let me deal with some solutions that all the women can consider. This will not apply to everyone, but certainly worth considering. The first is what I call the art of negotiation. And I'll come back to each of these items and talk about them in detail. The second is the willingness to become an apprentice, to learn. The third is the power of words. The fourth is the recognition of the interconnection of a man's psyche. And the fifth, in my opinion, these are just some recommendations, is peace. Now let me go through each of these so you can understand how an older woman can win the game of modern dating. What is negotiation? I learned this art of negotiation through the process of investing and looking for opportunities. One of the most powerful realizations that I discovered was you have to understand what the other person's non-negotiables are. You have to understand what their breaking point or what their limit is. You have to understand your non-negotiables and your limits. And once you've identified the non-negotiables on both sides, what you're dealing with are the extremes. Everything else in the middle is open for discussion. And whilst you're discussing and negotiating, you must recognize that sometimes you don't have to split the difference. You're not looking to get to the middle. You're not looking to split everything halfway. What you're hoping to do is understand what the other party considers more important and how you can meet their need without compromising on your most important needs as well. So let me give you a good example. A mother comes out and sees her two young sons fighting, and she says, "What's the fight over?" And it's over bread. There's this loaf of bread, and they're fighting over the loaf of bread. The mother says, "Stop." She takes a knife and cuts the bread into half and gives one to the first child and the other to the second child. Now, in the mother's mind, she's solved the issue. So she thinks. However, what if the second child, what if his preference was to have the ends of the bread? And what if the first child did not want the ends of the bread? Had she tried to understand what each of them wanted, she could have achieved a much better solution by ensuring that each person achieved what they wanted and each party was happy. In the same way, the art of negotiation with a man means you try to understand what he wants. Now, men are very, very easy to understand if you listen. But most importantly, if you listen without your emotions, without your feelings. I refer to negotiation, and one of the sessions I'm going to do is how to deal with infidelity. Many a times I've had conversations with my female friends, and I've said, most of you are losing because you're making statements from the get-go that is putting the man on his heels. One of such statements is, if a man cheats on me, I'll leave him. You've also, or he may have heard you make statements like, that woman's husband cheated, she should leave him. Every man is fallible, and every man is thinking, I know I'm going to be tested. My moment at the Garden of Gethsemane will come, and will I fail? There is nothing more reassuring as knowing that the future of a relationship that you care about is not dependent on every single mistake you make. So in the art of negotiation, is recognizing how you can use your words to provide the opportunity for the most difficult conversations that will normally happen, or the most difficult reasons why relationships fail, bringing that to the table and trying to iron out a deal. Now, for most women, this is very, very sensitive. I understand. But I would say if you were a mature woman, then certainly you've had the opportunity to observe men over a longer period. And certainly you know that we're flawed vessels. That does not mean you condone bad behavior, but you allow yourself to consider all of the reasons why something could go wrong. And both of you need to have a strategy in place to say, this is how we deal with breakdowns in our relationship in all areas: financial, relational, infidelity, spiritual, emotional, work. This is a cycle. Ladies, part of the reasons you want to negotiate is simply because with every man there are some needs that we have that we're born with. There are some needs that are seasonal, and there are some needs we cultivate. The cultivated needs come from our environment. The seasonal needs, sometimes we don't know where it comes from. Certainly we go through cycles and different seasons in life. So sometimes we want X, and the next we want Y, and the next we want Z, and the next we want X again. If you understand his core needs as a man, one of which is sex, then you can set parameters through the art of negotiation as to how his need for sex will be fulfilled. And part of the negotiation, ladies have never, in my experience, have never been appreciative of is, like the Garden